Ever since the Hunger Games, the discontent in District 8 has been growing. It was always there, of course, to some degree. But what differed was that talk was no longer sufficient, and the idea of taking action went from a wish to a reality. The textile factories that service Panem are loud with machinery, and the din also allowed for word to pass safely, a pair of lips close to an ear, words unnoticed and unchecked. Twill taught school. Bonnie was one of her pupils, and when the final bell had rung, both of them spent a 4-hour shift in the factory that specialized in peacekeeper uniforms. It took months for Bonnie, who worked in the chilly inspection dock, to secure the 2 uniforms, a boot here, a pair of pants there. They were intended for Twill and her husband, because it was understood that once the uprising began, it would be critical to get word out beyond District 8 if it were to spread and be successful. The day Pete and I came through and made our victory tour appearance was actually a rehearsal of sorts. People in the crowd positioned themselves according to their teams, next to the buildings they would target when the rebellion broke out. That was the plan, to take over the centers of power in the city, like the Justice Building, the Peacekeeper Headquarters, and the Communications Center in the square. At the other locations in the district, the railroad, the granary, the power station, and the army. The night of my engagement, the night Peter fell to his knees and proclaimed his undying love for me in front of the cameras in District 8, was the night the uprising began. It was an ideal cover. Our victory tour interview with Caesar Fleckerman was a mandatory viewing. It gave people of District 8 a reason to be out on the streets after dark around the city to watch. Ordinarily, such an activity would be too suspicious. Instead, everyone was in place by the appointed hour, 8 o'clock, when the masks went on and all hell broke loose. Taken by surprise and overwhelmed by sheer numbers, the peacekeepers were initially overcome by the crowds. The communication center, the granary, and the power station were all secured. As peacekeepers fell, weapons were appropriated for the rebels. There was hope that this had not been an act of madness, that in some way, if they could get the word out to other districts, an actual overthrow of the government in the capital might be possible. But then the axe fell. Peacekeepers began to arrive by the thousands. Hovercrafts bombed the rebel strongholds into ashes. In the utter chaos that followed, it was all the people could do to make it back to their homes alive. It took less than 48 hours to subdue the city. Then, for a week, there was lockdown. No food, no coal, everyone forbidden to leave their homes. The only time the television showed anything but static was when the suspicious instigators were hanged in the square. Then one night, as the whole district was on the brink of starvation, came the order to return to business as usual. That meant school for Twill and Bonnie. A street made impassable by the bombs caused them to be late for their factory shift. So they were still 100 yards away when it exploded, killing everyone inside, including Twill's husband and Bonnie's entire family. Someone must have told the capital that the idea for the uprising had started there, Twill told me faintly. The two fled back to Twill's, where the peacekeeper suits were still waiting. They scraped together what provisions they could, stealing freely from neighbors they knew they now knew to be dead, and made it to the railroad station. In a warehouse near the tracks, they changed into the peacekeeper outfits, and, disguised, were able to make it into a boxcar full of fabric on the train headed to District 6. They fled the train at a fuel stop along the way and traveled on foot. Concealed by the woods but using the tracks for guidance, they made it to the outskirts of District 12 in 2 days, or 2 days ago, where they were forced to stop when Bonnie twisted her ankle. I understand why you're running, but what do you expect to find in District 13, I asked. Bonnie and Twill exchanged a nervous glance. We're not exactly sure, Twill said. It's nothing but rubble, I say. We've all seen the footage. That's just it. They've been using the same footage for as long as anybody in District 8 can remember, says Twill. Really? I tried to think back to call up the images of 13 I've seen on television. You know how they always show the Justice Building? Twill continues. I nod. I've seen it 1,000 times. If you look very carefully, you'll see it, up in the far right-hand corner. See what? I ask. Twill holds out her cracker with the bird again. A mockingjay. Just a glimpse of it as it flies by. The same one every time. Back home, we think they keep reusing the old footage because the Capitol can't show what's really there now, says Bonnie. I give a grunt of disbelief. You're going to District 13 based on that? A shot of a bird? You think you're going to find some new city with people strolling around in it? And that's just fine with the Capitol? No, Twill says earnestly. We think the people moved underground when everything on the surface was destroyed. We think they managed to survive. And we think that the Capitol leaves them alone because... Before the dark days, District 13's principal industry was nuclear development. They're graphite miners, I say, but then I